Welcome to the program on how to preserve your family's history, how to preserve precious documents, letters, objects, and photos. Hello, my name is Lynn Vandervoort, and I am an Adult Services Assistant at the Middlefield Branch of the Geauga County Library. I'm also the former curator of the Museum and Library Collection of the Lake County History Center. My job there was documenting, organizing, storing, and exhibiting the over 30,000 pieces in the collection. Some of the techniques and museum practices I used might be helpful to you in your journey in preserving your family history. Many of us have boxes that are full of old photos or letters or scrapbooks or certificates, or we have objects that are precious to us, but are they really important to save? Well, yes, they are, because it's really not about the thing, it's about the story behind the thing. At the museum, I would often get a phone call from someone who wanted to donate an item to the collection. For example, someone would want to donate an old Bible. They would say, it must be valuable because it's really old. But I would say, tell me about the people that owned the Bible. What was their story? Does the Bible have a genealogy page in it? A list of births and deaths? Are their marriages recorded in it? The story behind the Bible is what makes it have significance over other old Bibles. It could have belonged to a pioneer family that emigrated from Germany and became founding members of the local community here in Geauga County. The Bible is a physical representation of that German family's story, and that's what makes it significant. One way to preserve your precious family items is to digitize them. The Geauga County Public Library has a new mobile memory lab that has a number of pieces of equipment that will allow you to digitize old photos, old slides, old cassettes, old vinyl albums, 8mm film, and more. You can digitize old media to preserve the information and then to share it with your family and friends. Even if you digitize your items, museums say, always keep the original. That means you'll need to organize and store your items. Museums break their collections down into 4 categories. One of them is photos. That would be things like tintypes, daguerreotypes, carte de visites, photo albums, even Xerox copies of images, snapshots, film, and negatives. Basically, photographic prints and negatives. Another category is archives. That's non-published materials like letters, journals, legal documents, lists, inventories, scrapbooks, basically things that are one-of-a-kind documents. Another category is libraries, and that would be published materials like books and booklets, Bibles, maps, newspapers, newspaper clippings, and yearbooks. Basically things that are reprinted or copied. And then there's the objects, things that are 3D, like clothing, figurines, art, furniture, or household items, like linens. Now, the thing to remember is that you don't want to separate out everything all the time into these categories. You might have things that should be grouped together. So, for example, you might have a journal that has photos that go with it and letters that go with it. Rather than separating them out, put them all together so that they are preserved together and they don't get lost. This will take some judgment calls. We'll talk about some other organizing techniques later on. Nothing lasts forever, except maybe polyester. But you can slow the processes down that deteriorate your items. Things like humidity and bugs, mice, light which fades paint and photos, glue which deteriorates and turns brown, gets absorbed into things, tape which becomes brittle and sticks and tears, plastics which also become brittle and break, ink, especially blue ink, which will seep into things and transfer from one document to another. One of the big enemies is wood. Wood leaches out acid over time. So that's the one thing we're going to concentrate the most on today. Now, some people ask, when I handle things, do I have to wear gloves? And the answer to that is now the best practices in museums is no, you don't wear gloves. You wash your hands and keep them dry, because wearing gloves keeps your fingers from feeling the stress that you're placing on items, particularly papers. So use your regular hands, no gloves, wash them, keep them dry, and if you feel like you're getting your hands dirty as you move along, wash them again and dry them, and that'll keep your items clean. Archival Methods is a website that I can recommend. It's easy to understand, and it has blog posts that talk about how to preserve your family items. Now, they do talk about methods and materials that are museum quality and can be expensive. But you don't have to use these materials. You can use items that you have at home and that you can buy easily online or around town and that are familiar to you already. One of the things you want to remember when you're storing things is layers. Layer everything. This will help protect them. You want to use acid-free tissue paper, sheets of cotton or linen writing paper, or unbleached muslin fabric, or you can store things in polypropylene document protectors. Most of these items are available through online stores or office supply stores. If you want to use museum quality products, I would recommend Gaylord Archival and University products. Those are sources that I used when I worked at a museum. And both of them are represented online, so you can order from them online. One of the museum quality products that I recommend that you use is an archival box, like the one that you see here in this picture. I used an archival box to store my mother and father-in-law's photos and documents. Now, museum product catalogs are so full of things that you can easily get lost in them, but these are pretty easy to identify. And they provide compact storage with reinforced corners and sides to protect against crushing. So you can push these boxes into a corner somewhere, or you can drop them, and it won't collapse. It will maintain its shape and protect the contents. Rather than storing photos loose in the box, you can put them in archival file folders, like you see here. And then you want to put them in the file folders separated and not overlapping. You also want to separate layers with the linen paper. Separating photos and documents with sheets of linen paper will keep the ink and the images from transferring onto other photos. Now, if you think it's overkill to keep everything separated like that, just take a look at this picture. These photos of my mother-in-law's 55th reunion of her nursing class are stuck together. If I pull them apart, I'll probably cause damage to the photos, both to the writing on the back of one and the image of the other. So keeping your items separated will keep this kind of thing from happening. My mother and father-in-law spent decades overseas. These are airmail letters that they sent home during those years. You can store letters in document protectors like these and put them in a binder. Now, this binder has a cover made of plastic, and it'll probably have to be replaced one day, but the documents can stay in the protectors. And it has the advantage that people can read the letters without touching them. Lots of my husband's family would like to read the airmail letters, but they live all over the world. So I digitized them, and I uploaded them to a place I can share them online. Let's move on to storing your precious objects. You can store objects in regular cardboard boxes, even though they're made of wood pulp. All you have to do is line the boxes with aluminum foil, and this prevents the acid from leaching into whatever you have stored in there. It's like creating a barrier. You also should wrap whatever you have in those boxes in acid-free tissue paper or unbleached muslin. I really recommend watching this particular video from the Minnesota Historical Society that shows how to store garments in boxes. It has great advice, and we'll talk more about what is in the video in the next slides as I show you how I stored my husband's grandfather's World War I uniform. My husband's grandfather's uniform was stored in this plastic bin. It's pretty small, and everything was folded very tightly, so it had lots of creases that had been smashed into the fabrics, plus a handful of mothballs were thrown into the bin. This was not good, and I needed to repack everything. The fabrics, when I took them out, all still smelled like mothballs, and in fact the bin actually still smelled like mothballs. I put everything into a cardboard box using foil to line the box, and I wrapped the garments in muslin, and I wrapped smaller things in tissue, and I padded the inside of the garments with tissue to keep them from becoming smashed and causing creases. I hope you took the time to watch the video from the Minnesota Historical Society, because in the video it shows that you wrap garments in muslin, and once you've wrapped them in muslin, it's like they're in a sling, and you can lift them in and out of the box very easily. So the top picture shows that I wrapped the uniform in muslin. In the middle picture, you can see that I put tissue inside the jacket or the garments in order to pad them up, and this helps to keep them from being smashed down and creases being formed. And then the smaller items, like these puttees, I wrapped in tissue paper and put in separately. As you can see, I used a regular cardboard box, and I lined the box with aluminum foil. I bought extra large aluminum foil in order to cover the interior of the box more easily. Each of the items that's in the box is wrapped in its own muslin sling, which makes it easy to pull them in and out of the box. The heaviest items are on the bottom, like the wool overcoat, and then the lighter items like the cotton shirts and the puttees are on the top. That keeps everything from being smashed down. Once you've got everything in, just fold the lid shut. Now, I get asked frequently where you should store things in your home. Put them in the attic, put them in the basement, where? The thing is, the attic and the basement really aren't great places to store your precious heirloom items. Really, they should be stored right in the same area of the house where you live, because you keep that area well ventilated, you keep it clean, you keep it free of insects and other critters, unless you have dogs or cats. But for the most part, the area where you live is the best place for all of these things to be stored. Earlier I said that we were going to talk about organizing some more. So that's what we're going to do now. There are things that you can do with your collection that can make it easier for you to share it with your family. And one of the things is that you can use the Geauga County Library System's Mobile Memory Lab and make digital versions of your family items. So you can make copies and then share them with your family. For example, you can do what I did, which is that I uploaded the digital images of all of those letters, and then I shared them with family members all around the world. Another thing you can do is indexing. And this is useful for things like scrapbooks and journals, diaries, and reminiscences. The way that you index something is you go through and you number all of your pages with a pencil in one of the corners, and then you make a list of all of the names as they appear, and then on the pages they appear, And then after you've made that list, you alphabetize the list. You keep the index with the original, but then you give copies of the index with copies of the items to your family. Another thing you can do is you can transcribe something. This is particularly good for handwritten items, and it makes it easier to read them. What you want to do is type the item, the letter, the journal, or whatever it is, word for word as it is written. Now there are instructions for transcription at the website that's listed here on the slide. And they're pretty easy. Basically, once you've finished your transcription, you keep a copy of the transcript with the original so that the original doesn't need to be handled. And then you make copies of the transcript and send it around to family members so that they can read it. Something else you can do is you can describe your collection. Now this is something that museums call a finding aid. It describes who you are, where the collection comes from, why it was preserved, and then describes the arrangement and the contents of the storage containers. There are a lot of rules and standards that museums have to follow, but you can do what works the best for you and your family. So think about your audience and what will be important to them to know, and then what would make it easy for them to find what they're looking for. So for example, if you have multiple boxes, let's say you have 4, what you can do is label the boxes 1 of 4, 2 of 4, 3 of 4, and 4 of 4. And that way your family knows that there are 4 boxes altogether, and if they've only got 3, they're missing one. You also want to describe the contents of the boxes. So if you take box 1 of 4, what you want to do is describe what's in it. It would be, for example, Grandma Martha Van de Voort's Airmail letters, photographs from the 1960s, the family Bible with the genealogy page. Box 2 of 4, you could say there are 6 file folders. Folder 1 has photos, folder 2 has letters, folder 3 has certificates, etc. So how much detail you include in it is up to you. I hope you've enjoyed this program on how to preserve your family's history. There's a lot of information packed into the video, so the slides are available in PDF form. You can print them out and read them at your leisure, and you can copy the links to the websites like the video from the Minnesota Historical Society and the websites on archival preservation and how to do transcriptions. And then you can paste them into your web browser and explore them on your own. Before I close, I want to suggest that you try to preserve documents that are born digital. These are things like emails, text messages, Facebook Messenger threads, and Instagram posts. For example, my husband and son served in Iraq in the military, and I saved emails my husband and I sent to each other, and I downloaded my son's thread from Facebook Messenger. That's how I communicated the most with him while he was overseas. And Facebook has instructions on how to download your Messenger files. I plan to print out the Messenger thread and scrapbook the messages and the photos and the links into a journal my son gave me for Christmas. And then I want to give him the journal as a gift sometime in the future. Documents that are born digital exist only as long as we have our devices and accounts where the documents are stored. But if we don't make hard copies of them, we risk losing that information forever. It would be impossible to save all of our digital documents, but you can be selective. So, if you have a daughter and you helped her plan a wedding, wouldn't it be fun to download some of those text messages and then scrapbook them and give them to her as a gift? I can imagine there would be some pretty memorable text messages that you shared. Now that really is everything for this program. Again, I hope you enjoyed the program on how to preserve your family's history. If you have any questions, you can contact the Geauga County Library at the email that's on this slide.